In my own world of feeling and thought, the loftiest mysteries lie hidden, only I have hitherto not been aware of them. Let the pupil place before her a small seed of a plant. The point is to intensify the right kinds of thoughts while contemplating this insignificant object, and through these thoughts to develop certain feelings. First, let her realize clearly what her eyes are actually seeing. Then let her reflect as follows. Out of this seed, there will grow a plant of complex structure. Let her visualize this plant, build it up with her imagination, and say to herself, what I am now picturing in my imagination will later be drawn out of the seed by the forces of the earth and the light. She will say to herself, all that will ultimately grow out of the seed is already secretly enfolded within it as the force of the whole plant. In the artificial imitation of the seed, no such force is present. And yet to my eyes both appear alike. The real seed, therefore, contains something invisible which is not present in the imitation. It is to this invisible something that thought and feeling are now to be directed. What is being thought here must also be intensely felt. In inner quiet, the thought indicated must be experienced. And sufficient time must be allowed for the thought and feeling united with it to penetrate the soul. If this is brought about in the right way, then after a time, possibly only after many attempts, an inner force will make itself felt, and this force will create a new power of perception. The grain of seed will appear as if enveloped in a small luminous cloud. In a sensory spiritual way, it will be felt as a kind of flame. The center of this flame evokes the same impression as that made by the color lilac. The edges give the impression of a bluish tint. Something formerly not seen is here revealed, created by the power of the thoughts and feelings that have been inwardly stirred into activity. The plant itself, which will become physically visible only later on, now manifests in a spiritually visible way. A further exercise to be linked onto the one previously described is the following. Let the pupil place before her a fully developed plant. Now let her fill her mind with the thought, the time will come when this plant will wither and die. Nothing of what I now see before me will then exist, but the plant will have developed seeds, and these in their turn will grow into new plants. Again, I become aware that in what I see, something I do not see lies hidden. I fill my mind with the thought, this plant, which its forms and colors, will in time be no more. But the fact that it produces seeds teaches me that it will not vanish into nothingness. Present, I cannot see with my eyes what preserves it from disappearance any more than I could previously see the plant and the seed. Hence, there is something in the plant that my eyes do not see. If I let this thought live in me, imbued with the feeling that should go with it, then in due time there will again develop in my soul a force which will become new vision. Again, there will grow out of the plant a kind of spiritual flame form, correspondingly large, of course, than the one previously described. It may give an impression of blue in the middle and yellowish red at the outer edges. The plant is not merely visualized in the imagination. For the point is not that I arbitrarily create visions for myself, but that reality creates them in me. The truth must well up from the depths of my own soul, but the magician who conjures forth the truth must not be my ordinary ego, but the actual beings whose spiritual reality I want to behold. Before making any attempts in this direction, it is imperative that she should work with particular earnestness at the thorough purification of her moral character. She must banish every thought of ever using for her own personal benefit knowledge gained in this way. The golden rule of genuine occult science is as follows. For every one step forward that one takes in seeking knowledge of occult truths, take 3 steps forward in the improvement of one's own character. If this rule is observed, such exercises as the following may be attempted. Recall to mind someone whom you may have observed when they were filled with desire for some object. Attention should be focused on the desire itself. After many attempts, you will succeed in bringing things to the point of experiencing in your own soul a feeling corresponding to the state of soul of the individual observed. A picture seeming to be luminous will appear in your field of vision, and this spiritually luminous pictures the so-called astral embodiment of the state of soul caused by the desire. With the would-be initiate must bring with her is a certain mature courage and fearlessness. She must go out of her way to find opportunities through which these qualities are developed. In occult training, they should be cultivated systematically, but in this respect, life itself is a good school, perhaps the best of all. The pupil must be prepared to look danger calmly in the face and be resolute to overcome difficulties unswervingly. For instance, when faced with some danger, she must immediately bring herself to realize, my fear is utterly useless. I should have none of it, but rather think only of what is to be done. And she must reach the point where, in circumstances where she would formerly have been fearful, to be frightened, to lack courage, are out of the question for her, at least in her innermost self. By self-discipline in this direction, a human develops in herself very definite forces which she needs if she is to be initiated into higher mysteries. Just as physical human needs nervous forces in order to use her physical senses, so as a being of soul she needs the forces which is developed only in courageous, fearless natures. In the world there are constructive and destructive forces. The destiny of manifested being is to come into existence and to pass away. The seer has to penetrate into the working of these forces and the course of destiny. The veil screening the eyes of spirit in everyday life must be removed. But the human is interwoven with these forces, with this destiny. In her own nature, there are destructive and upbuilding forces. To the eyes of the seer, her own soul is revealed as undisguisedly as other objects are. The pupil must not lose strength in the face of this self-knowledge, and only if she brings a surplus with her will her strength not fail. To this end, she must learn to maintain inner calm and steadiness in difficult circumstances in life. She must cultivate in herself a strong trust in the beneficent powers of existence. She must be prepared to find that many motives which had actuated her before will do so no longer. She will have to realize that hitherto she has thought and done many things only because she was in the toils of ignorance. Such reasons as were formerly hers will disappear. She did many things out of vanity. Now she will see how utterly futile vanity is for the seer. She did many things out of the desire for possessions. Now she will realize how destructive all desire for possessions is. She will have to develop quite new motives for thinking and acting, and it is here that courage and fearlessness are acquired. It is preeminently a question of cultivating this courage and this fearlessness in the innermost depths of the life of thought. The pupil must learn not to despair over failure. She must be capable of the thought, "I will forget that I have once more failed in this manner, and will try again as though nothing has happened." In this way she struggles through to the conviction that the sources of strength in the universe upon which she can draw are inexhaustible. Initiation. An individual can learn of the mysteries of existence only as much as corresponds with her degree of maturity. The first trial consists in acquiring a truer vision than the average human possesses of the corporeal attributes of lifeless things than of plants, animals, and human beings. This does not mean what is called scientific knowledge today, for it is a question not of science, but of vision. As a rule, the process is that the would-be initiate learns how the things of nature and living beings manifest themselves to the spiritual ear and the spiritual eye. In a certain way, these beings and things then lie disclosed, naked, before the beholder. The qualities which are there heard and seen are concealed from the physical eye and the physical ear. They are hidden from sensory perception as though behind a veil. The falling away of this veil for the would-be initiate is connected with a process known as spiritual burning away. Hence, this first trial is called trial by fire. After the trial by fire, every candidate may still turn back. Strengthened in both soul and body, she will then resume her life and wait for a future incarnation to continue the process of initiation. In her present incarnation, however, she will be a more useful member of society than she was before. In whatever situation she may find herself, her steadiness, circumspection, beneficent influence over her fellow humans, and her fixity of purpose will have increased. If after completing the trial by fire the candidate wishes to continue the esoteric training, a certain script generally adopted in such training must be disclosed to her. The true esoteric teachings reveal themselves in this script because the really hidden, occult content of things can neither be expressed directly in the words of ordinary language, nor set forth in ordinary writing. Those who have learnt from the initiates translate the teachings of occult science into ordinary language as best they can. The occult script reveals itself to the soul when the soul has developed spiritual perception, for it is inscribed enduringly in the spiritual world. It cannot be learnt as artificial writing is learnt and read. The candidate grows in the appropriate way towards clairvoyant knowledge, and during this process there develops in her, as a faculty of soul, the power impelling her to decipher the happenings and beings of the spiritual world as she would decipher the characters of a script. The signs of the occult script are not arbitrarily devised, but correspond to the forces actively working in the world. The language of things is learnt through these signs. It becomes immediately apparent to the candidate the signs she is now coming to know correspond to the figures, colors, tones, and so on, which she learned to perceive during the stages of preparation and enlightenment. She realizes that everything she had previously learned was only like learning to spell. Now for the first time she is beginning to read in the higher world. The separate shapes, tones, and colors are now revealed to her as forming a great interconnected whole. Now for the first time she has real certainty in observing the higher worlds. Previously she could never be positive whether the things she saw were seen correctly, and now at last a systematic understanding is possible between the candidate and the initiate in the domain of higher knowledge. For whatever the association between an initiate and another individual may be in everyday life, the higher knowledge in its direct form can be impaired by the initiate only in the sign language already described. Through this language, the pupil becomes acquainted also with certain rules of conduct and with certain duties of which she had previously known nothing. Having coming to know these rules, she can perform actions endowed with a significance such as the actions of one who is not initiated can never possess. She acts out at the higher worlds. Indications for such actions can be understood only in terms of the occult script. But it must be emphasized that there are individuals who are unconsciously capable of performing such actions, although they have never undergone an esoteric training. Such helpers of the world and of humanity lead lives of blessing and good deeds. Once the student has learned the sign script, a further trial begins for her. This is to prove whether she can move with freedom and certainty in the higher worlds. In everyday life, a human is impelled to action by inducements from outside. She works at some occupation because one duty or another is imposed upon her by circumstances. It need hardly be mentioned that the pupil must neglect none of her desires in everyday life because she is living in higher worlds. No duty in a higher world can force anyone to neglect a single one of her duties in the ordinary world. To this end, the candidate will find herself faced in the course of her training with a definite task. She has to perform some action in consequence of observations made on the basis of what she has learnt during the stages of preparation and enlightenment, and she must recognize what she has to do through the understanding she has acquired of the occult script. If she recognizes her duty and acts rightly, she has been successful in this trial. Her success can be known from the alteration produced by her actions and the patterns, colors, and tones apprehended by her spiritual ears and eyes. As the training progresses, exact indications are given of what the patterns and so on look like after the action has been performed, and the candidate must know how and why she was able to bring about the change. This trial is known as the trial by water, because in her activity in these higher realms, the candidate lacks any support from outer circumstances, just as support is lacking when someone moves about in water that is out of her depth. The procedure must be repeated until the candidate has gained perfect assurance under these conditions. This trial, too, is concerned with acquiring a certain quality. Through her experiences in the higher worlds, the candidate develops this quality in a short time to such a high degree that she could normally have acquired it only after many more incarnations. The essential thing is that in order to bring about in the higher realms of existence the change referred to, she must follow only what is based upon her higher perception and her reading of the occult script. Should she, in the course of her action, introduce any element of her own wishes, opinions, and so forth, or should she for one moment evade the laws she has recognized to be right in order to indulge her own arbitrary will, the result would be altogether different from what should properly come about. In this case, the candidate would at once lose sight of the goal of her action, and confusion would set in. Throughout this trial, therefore, the candidate has abundant opportunity to develop her self-control, and that is what matters above all. Here again, those whose life before initiation had led them to acquire self-control will find it easier to undergo this trial successfully. Whoever has acquired the faculty of following high principles and ideals, while setting aside personal predilections, whoever is capable of always performing her duty when inclinations and sympathies are only too ready to divert her from it, such a one is unconsciously an initiate even in everyday life, and only a little will still be necessary to enable her to succeed in this trial. Indeed, it must even be said that a certain degree of initiation already unconsciously gained in life will be indispensable for success in this second trial. In the higher worlds, our wishes, desires, and inclinations have an actual effect on things. If we want to produce a particular effect in these worlds, we must have ourselves completely under control. We must follow the right principles only, and be subject to no arbitrary impulse. human quality that comes into very special consideration at this stage of initiation is an absolutely healthy and reliable faculty of judgment. Attention should be paid to the training of this faculty during the early stages, and this will show whether the candidate is equipped for the true path of knowledge. Further progress is possible only if she can distinguish illusion, meaningless pictures of fancy, superstitions, and phantasmagoria of every kind, from reality. This is at first more difficult at the higher stages of existence than at the lower. Every preconception, every cherished opinion with regard to the things in question must disappear. Truth alone must guide. There must be perfect readiness to abandon any idea, opinion, or inclination directly logical thought demands it. Certainty in higher worlds is to be attained only when one's personal opinion is never cherished.